Okay, we're up to Ayin Dalin Amid Beis, and about 9 lines from the bottom. Iboiluhu. The Gemara has the following question: Ma'u limnois by Rishon v'Sheni. The question is, if you shechta a mother, cow, and you find inside a baby that's a fetus, and let's say the mother became tamei. The question is, normally when it comes to tumah, every time an item of tamei touches another item, it goes down to madregas of tumah. So if a rishon touches something, it becomes a sheni to shlishi, shlishi to revi. The question is, if the mother becomes tamei, what is the status of the fetus inside? Is the fetus the same madrega of tumah as the mother, or is it a madrega down? Now, let's say the mother was a rishon. Does the fetus become a rishon also? Meaning, do we look at the fetus as mamish a chelik of the mother? That the same way, it's like the Gemara is going to point out, it's like a nut. If you touch the shell of the nut inside is the same madrega. Or do you say no? The mother and the baby are separate entities in that the mother is a rishon, the baby will be a sheni. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar Minor Rishon v'Sheni. Rabbi Yochanan says the baby is a madrega lower than the mother. Rishon Lakish a Minor Rishon v'Sheni. Rish Lakish disagrees. He says no, the mother and the baby are mamish one entity. Whatever tumah the mother is, the baby is. And nasa ke'egois and mekashkesh b'klipasei. It's like the fetus is like a walnut in its shell. In the same way, if you touch the shell, it's not just matam of the shell, it's matam of the walnut inside, and we don't go down madregas. That's just a chelik of it. So too, the mother is the shell of the baby, but the baby has the same status of the mother when it comes to tumah. It does not go down in madregas of tumah. So, the Gemara says, Rish Lakish asks Rav Yechon the following question. Now, the Mishnah says like this: Habasar maganavel. We had this previously. If you have a fetus sticks its hand out before the shechita, so the question is, what is the hand of the fetus? So Rameir said that it's nevela, it's ev menachai, and therefore it's metame the rest of the fetus. Rabbanan said no, and it's not ev menachai. The shechita removes the tumas nevela. It just has tumas treifa, which affects karbanos. So Habasar maganavel de Rameir v'chol magad treifa shchuta. Now, he says like this. Here's the question. So the hand that's sticking out is tamei and is transmitting tumah to the rest of the animal. Either according to the Rameir, it's transmitting tumah as ev menachai, as a nevela, and according to the Rabbanan, it's just a treifa. But the entire baby is considered susceptible to tumah. Now, why? Because it's food. Food is susceptible to tumah. So the hand that's tamei is transmitting tumah to the rest. Now, again, for it to transmit tumah to the rest of the fetus has to be susceptible to tumah. Now, for it to be susceptible to tumah, you need two things. It has to have the status of food, which it does. It also has to have gotten wet at some point. Now, we perceive that inside that's not considered wet. It has to have touched a liquid from the outside. When did it do that? It never did, because it was inside the womb the entire time. The only thing that became wet is the mother outside became wet by the dam shchita. So that means that the mother touched the dam shchita. The dam shchita splattered from the mother's neck and touched the rest of it. So the mother now became hochshel l'tumah, and that automatically made the baby hochshel l'tumah. Now says Rish Lakish's shita is that whatever tumah status the mother has, the baby has as well, because the baby and the mother is mamish one entity. He says, to me, it makes sense. The mother became hochshel l'tumah because it came in contact with a liquid, and that automatically made the baby hochshel l'tumah. Even though the baby never came in contact with a liquid, the baby was inside the womb the whole time. And yet, it's an automatic hechshel l'tumah from the mother to the child. So says Rish Lakish, to me that makes sense, because I look at them as one entity. But to you, that you look at them as two separate entities. That the mother is, let's say, a rishon, that makes the baby a sheni, so mamish two separate entities. So how did the baby ever become hochshel l'tumah? It never came in contact with the liquid. All it had was it went through its mother's shchita. It was nishchat, but there was no dam because it was inside the fetus the whole time, inside the womb the whole time. And don't tell me that because the mother became wet, so to the baby is automatically hochshev. You look at them as two separate entities. Says Rish Lakish, how did it become hochshel l'tumah? Hochshel l'tumah needs a liquid. It never came in contact with a liquid. So Amar Lei b'shchita krev Shimon, and the answer is, if you remember, we had this about a month and a half ago. Rav Shimon shita is that if an animal is shechted, it's automatically hochshel l'tumah even if no dam comes out. The ma'isa shchita itself makes it roy l'kabel tumah. So the baby, you're right, it never became in contact with the liquid. And we don't look at the mother and the baby as one entity, that the mother's hochshel l'tumah affects the baby. Mamish, two separate entities. So how is the baby hochshel l'tumah? The answer is because when you shechted the mother and his kilo, the baby went through a shchita, the shchita is itself machshir, even without a liquid, and it falls Shimon. Okay. Rav Yechon now asks Rish Lakish the following question. Hey, sir, Rav Yechon Rish Lakish, that is a brisa. Now this brisa says that if you shecht a mother, and you take the mother outside, the mother comes out, right? You open up the mother, you take out the 9-month-old, you take out a fetus. Now this brisa feels that the fetus is not automatically roy l'kabel tumah, but over benahar, if the baby walks through a river, so now it became wet, hochsher. It's now roy l'kabel tumah because it became wet, and holach l'besak faris nitma, and then if it walks into a cemetery, it's tamei. Now two things you see from this brisa. One is agav that we'll talk about in a little bit. The animal is mekabel tumah when it's alive. This fetus that's walking around is now tamei while it's alive, which is a tremendous chiddush because normally animals are not mekabel tumah when they're alive; they have to die first. But let's put that aside. The one thing you see though is that this baby is born. It's not automatically mekabel tumah based on the mother's blood touching the mother's body. No. Dafa had to go to a river according to this brisa. So says Rav Yechon, that's a raya to me. Because according to Rish Lakish, the mother and the baby are one piece, which means when the mother had blood of the dam splattered on it, it was mekabel roy l'kabel tumah. So automatically that should make a baby roy l'kabel tumah. It should not have to come in contact with the liquid. But says Rav Yechon, and according to me, that the mother and the baby are two separate entities. It makes sense. The mother's roy l'kabel tumah, but not the baby, until the baby goes through a river. So it's sort of the reverse question in the previous Gemara. The previous Brisa felt that the baby's automatically roy l'kabel tumah. This Brisa feels no. Dafka, the baby has to go through a river. Now why does it have to go through a river? The mother's roy l'kabel tumah because there was dam shchita. The answer is it must be the mother and the baby are two separate entities. I hold that the baby and the mother are two separate entities. Therefore, according to me, it had to go through the river. But according to you, Rish Lakish, that the fetus and the mother are one entity, so then why does the baby have to go through the river? It's already mekabel tumah. Why? Because the mother had blood when it shechted the mother. The blood splattered on the mother. Automatically, that's just nature of shechita. Therefore, the mother is roy l'kabel tumah because it came in contact with the liquid of the dam. So that should automatically affect the baby as well. So says the Gemara, the case is, you're right. If the mother, when you shechted the mother, blood came out, it automatically would make the mother roy l'kabel tumah, and that would automatically make the baby roy l'kabel tumah according to Rish Lakish. The case is where you shechted the mother and no dam came out. And it does not follow the view of Rav Shimon that shechita alone makes a roy l'kabel tumah. No. You need to come in contact with the liquid, and the mother didn't come in contact with the liquid. Therefore, the baby, who's a chilik of the mother, is also not roy l'kabel tumah until it goes through the river. So normally it would, but it's a very obscure case where when you shechted the mother, no dam came out. Now, okay, now you do see from this sugya, I pointed it out before, generally, for an animal to be mekabel tumah, it has to die. Living animals, living people can become tamei. Living animals cannot become tamei. But we said that this fetus that comes out, this ben pekua, it goes into a cemetery, it's tamei while it's alive. What's the pshat? So the reason is because it already went through a shechita by its mother, meaning when its mother was shechted, now the baby does not need a shechita. It was already went through the process of shechita in halacha. Therefore, you could shoot in the head, not Torah, not like Rameir, whatever. When you shoot in the head, therefore it's already ki'ilu, it's nishchat. Therefore, while it's walking, it's as if it's already dead. So because it doesn't need shechita, it's able to become tamei while it's alive. So the Gemara says, who's the author of this? This chiddush, that you can have a living animal that does not need shechita, that can become tamei. So the Gemara says, man tana, ovar benor hochsher halach lebeis akvaris nitma. So Rav Yechon and Rav Yossi Haglili, it follows the view of Rav Yossi Haglili, the Tanya. Rav Shimon ben Elazar Mishum Rav Yossi Haglili, Metame Tumas Eichlin, V'tzarech Hechsher. Rav Yossi Haglili's shita is that a ben pekua, as long as it becomes wet, it can become tamei while it's alive. The Rabbanan disagree. They say no, it's alive. Living animals cannot become tamei. So it's machlekes of Yossi and the Chacham. Now, both Rashi explains, both Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim follow the Rabbanon, that it does not need to be nishchat. Again, according to Rav Meir, if you find a 9-month-old fetus inside the mother's womb, although it's a ben peku, it needs its own shchita. According to Rav Meir, if it needs its own shchita, then it's like any other animal. It's not mekabel to when it's alive. It's dafka follows the shita of the Rabbanon, that because it does not need shchita, it's ki'ilu was already nishchat. If it's already nishchat, then it's as if it's dead while it's walking, and therefore it's mekabel tuma while it's alive. This is Rav Yechon l'shitasai, that if you have an animal that does not need shchita, it can become tummy while it's alive. What's another example of an animal that does not need shchita that can become tummy when it's alive? Fish. You don't have to shech fish. Could a live fish become tummy? So Rav Yechanan says, Rav Yossi Haglili b'Shamai Amar Derechad. Rav Yechanan said, Rav Yossi Haglili and b'Shamai say the same thing. What do they say? So Rav Yossi Haglili Hada Amar. Rav Yossi Haglili is a shita we just said that a ben peku, which does not need shchita, can become tummy while it's alive. And b'Shamai is the Tanan. Dogim me'emasai mekabel tuma. At what point can fish become tamei? Beishamai says once you catch a fish, it's still alive. It's already can become tamei. So that means that's why, because it doesn't need shchita, and anything that doesn't need shchita, it's ki'ilu, it's a dead one, it's still alive. So Rav Yossi and the Rabban and Beishamai say the same thing. Now Beis Hillel says no, mishamuzu. Beis Hillel says fish are like all other animals, which is it's not mekabel tuma while it's alive, it has to die. Rabbi Akiva has a slightly different shita. He says, Rabbi Akiva says the fish doesn't actually have to die. It just has to be that it cannot survive anymore. Meaning, let's say you take a fish out of water and it's already dried up enough. It's still thrashing around, but it's not going to survive. According to Rabbi Akiva, it's mekabel tama while it's alive because it's mamish ki'ilu, it's dead. Unlike Beis Hillel, who says it has to be dead, according to Rabbi Akiva, as long as you know it's not going to survive this situation, for the moment, it won't be able to survive. It's now roy l'kabel tuma, even though it's technically still alive. A fish that's thrashing around. According to Beis Hillel, it's not mekabel tuma until it's officially dead, no more pulse. And according to Rabbi Akiva, once you know that it's going to die, then it's already mekabel tuma while it's still alive. By Rav Yechanan, Rav Chisda Sakasha. There's no concept of a treifa by a fish, because let's say what's this treifa? A hole in the intestines. You can eat a fish that's a treifa because it doesn't need shchita, and treifas and shchitas are very much related to each other. But here's the question: we just got finished saying that if a fish is going to die or it's dead, it's mekabel tuma. According to Beishamai, it could be mekabel tuma when it's alive. But let's focus on Beis Hillel and Rav Akiva. Let's focus on Rav Akiva. Rav Akiva says, once you know a fish is going to die, it's mekabel tuma even while it's alive. So the question is like this: what if you have a fish that has a siman treifa? It's fine, it's floating, it's swimming, whatever. Not floating, it's swimming. But it has a hole in the intestines. The question is it mekabel tuma while it's still alive? Do we say that because it's a treifa, it's already ki'ilu, it's dead? Or you say, no, there's no such thing as treifa by a fish. So that's the Gemara's kasha. And the Gemara says the truth is, this shaila is unrelated to the general question of whether an animal can survive by a treifa. There was a shaila we had earlier in the Masechta, whether a treifa chaya, could a treifa live? Meaning a treifa cannot live forever. The question is, can it live up to 12 months? It was a machlokes tanoim. So the Gemara says this shaila is sort of unrelated. Our shaila about whether a fish is makabel tuma if it has a treifa while it's still alive is unrelated to whether treifas can live a year. Even if you hold that a treifa can normally live a year, maybe that's behemud in a fish chayusa, meaning that could only be by an animal. That an animal can survive up to 12 months because it's a big, strong animal. But a fish, maybe, if it has a treifa, it can't survive more than a day, and therefore it's ki'ilu, it's dead, and it should be mekabel tuma. Ideal, more the opposite. Or the opposite is only true. Even if you hold that normally a treifa has to die right away, can't survive, maybe the concept of a treifa is only significant by a behemoth which has the laws of shchita. But a fish that has no laws of shchita, maybe a treifa is irrelevant. And even if it has a hole in the intestines, it's still alive in halacha. It's a treifa. If I a cow, it would be dead. Yeah, but it's not a cow. And therefore, it's not makabel tama. Teiku, unrelated, unresolved. Now, the Gemara has one more question. No, a lot more questions. Another question. We know that the chaylev of a behema is not allowed to be eaten, but the chaylev of a chaya is allowed to be eaten. The question is, what if a behema, a cow, hitila nefel, it miscarries and a fetus comes out? Now, the question is, now we're going to exactly clarify the case, but we're assuming the case is where it did not go full term. I mean, it's not a 9-month-old. After 6 months, miscarries. The question is, that fetus that came out, can I eat the chaylev? You'll say, on the one hand, well, it's a cow. Cow, chaylev is aser. On the other hand, maybe the definition of a cow regarding the chaylev is if it was brought to full term, and this was 6 months, so therefore, because it died before the full term, it's not a behema in halacha. So Rav Yechon Amar Chel Beichel behema. Rav Yechon says you're not allowed to eat the chaylev. Rish Lakish Amar Chel Chaylev Chayer. Rish Lakish says there is no kares for eating the chaylev because it's not a behema. Rav Yechon Amar Chel Beichel behema. Rav Yechon says that its chaylev is aser avira garim. A behema in halacha is something that comes out of a cow as long as it comes to the existence. It comes out of its womb. It wasn't full term, irrelevant. Avira, just coming out of the air, coming into the air. It's mere, leaving of the womb makes it a behem in halacha, and therefore it's chaylev v'zasa, like all behemoths. Rish Lakish says chaylev chaylev chaya, chadashim garmi. Rish Lakish says no, it needs chadashim, it needs the full term in months. I think a cow is 7 months. I don't think it's 9 months. I think it's 7 months. The point is, if it's 5 months, it's not a chadashim. It didn't have the amount of chadashim, amount of chodesh. Chodesh is a month. It doesn't have the amount of months, and therefore it's not considered a behema in halacha. Now, the first version is that it did not go to full term. Ikadamri, some have a different version. Kol heichal deloi kol chadashim leklumu. The second version is like this: if the fetus did not carry the full term, let's say the full term is 7 months, and it miscarried after 5, kuli amalei plig delechashim. Everyone agrees the chaylev is mutter. That's not a machlekes. According to this version, what's the machlekes? The case is where you stuck your hand into the animal's womb, and the baby is 9 months, but it just wasn't born yet. You stick your hand into the womb and you pull off some of the chaylev. And you eat it. The question is it also? You'll say, now here's the shayla. The shayla is, do you say that, well, it's 9 months, so it's a behema, it's aser, or do you say no? It needs 9 months and it needs to come out of the womb on its own. It has to be birthed. So because you got it before the birth, it's not technically chaylev. Rav Yechon says it's also chadashim garmi because it's full 9 months, full term. I guess I say 9 months. Okay, I take it back. I thought cows are not full months. Okay, 9 months. Okay, the kitzer, it's the full term, and therefore it's a problem. Rish Lakish says no. The chaylev is mutter. Why? Chadashim va'avira garim. You need the full term, and you need to have it has to have been birthed. And because you stuck your hand into the womb and pulled it out, it's not considered a behema in halacha regarding the chaylev. Okay, weiter. Long dafim these days. Rav Yechon Rish Lakish asked Rish Lakish the following question. Now the rule is whatever chaylev was brought on the mizbeach is the chaylev that's aser. Now we have a brisa. The brisa says, "Ma chaylev shtiklois hamuris ba'asher moitzi michlal shlil." I've called moitzi michlal shlil. This brisa clearly states that if you bring a carbon, and inside the carbon there's a fetus, you do not burn the chaylev of the fetus on the mizbeach. So says Rabbi Yechon like this. Who is that a raya to? Rabbi Yechon says that's a raya to me. Again, Rabbi Yechon shita is that the chaylev of the full-term baby is aser right away. So says Rabbi Yechon, to me it makes sense. Why? If you hold like me that it's aser, that's why you need the pasuk to say, even though it's chaylev that's aser, it's a chiddush hakra, don't burn it on the mizbeach. But says Rav Yechon to Rish Lakish, but according to you, it's not chaylev in halacha. Why do I need the pasuk to tell me not to burn on the mizbeach? It's not chaylev. I mean, the pasuk is telling us that the chaylev, normally whatever's brought on the mizbeach is chaylev it's aser. The pasuk says the chaylev of the baby is not brought on the mizbeach. So says Rav Yechon, it's a raya to me. Why? If you hold that chaylev is aser, then I get why the pasuk has to say normally chaylev that's aser is burnt on the mizbeach. This chaylev is aser, but it's not burnt on the mizbeach. But according to you, Reish Lakish, that chaylev that's aser, that it's taka chaylev that's mutter. If it's chaylev, it's mutter. What do you need the pasuk to tell me not to burn on the mizbeach? Of course not. It's not chaylev. Says the Gemara. Bishleim Eladidi says Rav Yechanan that the chaylev is aser hayim the itzah kral mute. That's why you need a pasuk to tell me that it's not burnt on the mizbeach. Eladidach. But according to you, that it's not chaylev in halacha mai itzah. What do you need a pasuk for to tell me that it's not burnt on the mizbeach? Of course, it's not burnt on the mizbeach. It's chaylev that's mutter. So Rish Lakish counters. You got it wrong. This is my makar. This is my source. What does the brisa say? The brisa says it's not burnt on the mizbeach. Says Rish Lakish. That's how I got it from. Meaning you're looking at it as well. If it's If it's not chaylev, why does the pasuk have to tell me it's not burnt on the mizbech? Rish Lakish says, no, that's gufa my makar. Because the pasuk says it's not burnt on the mizbech, that indicates it's not chaylev. Amar lei, time of the dina mehacha. So Rish Lakish says, you got it wrong. It's not that this pasuk and then you already have my shita, and then how does it work with the pasuk? The pasuk is my makar. Because it's not burnt on the mizbech, that indicates it's not chaylev. So Ikadamri, some have a different version. The Rish Lakish asks the kasha to Rabbi Yechanan. Machel v'shekloyes hamuris ba'asher moitzim michal shul av kol moitzim michal shul bishlam dim mishum hachi mitekra el didachli karev. According to this version, Rish Lakish counters and he says to Rabbi Yechanan, according to you, it's full chaylev. Why tak is it not burnt on the mizbeach? Bishlam to me, the pasuk says it's not burnt on the mizbeach. That's my makar that it's not chaylev. But according to you, if it's full fledged chaylev, why tak is it not burnt on the mizbeach? So Amar Lei, he responded, midab mechuzes man. He said like this: let's say you have a baby that's too young. You have a fetus that's 2 days old. A baby that's 2 days old. Can you burn it on the mizbech? No, it's too young. So too over here, like he says, Rabbi Yechanan, really it's takachel that's also. So why is it not burned on the mizbech? It's too young because it came from a baby, a fetus. It's too young. It doesn't mean it's taka is chayil that's also. It's an exception to the rule of why it's not burnt. Meaning, Reish Lakish looks at this as the makar because it's not burnt on the mizbech. That indicates it's not chayil. Rabbi Yechanan says no, it's takachel. So why is it not burnt on the mizbech? It's the exception because it's too young. Okay. Rav Ami, hashaychet is a treifa. If you shecht a treifa, umatza ba ben tisha chai, and you find inside the treifa a full 9-month fetus. Now here's the question. Now remember from our Mishnah, if you have a 9-month fetus that's alive, that's found inside an animal, Rameir says it needs its own shechita. The shechita mother does not help. Mamish, two separate entities. And the Rabbanan said, no, the shechita of the mother helps. So here's the shaila. That's by a healthy cow. It's a shaila of whether the baby needs shechita, its own shechita. Over here you have a treifa. And you find a 9-month-old fetus that's alive inside the stomach. Can I eat the fetus? With the shechita, whatever, forget about the shechita. Can I eat the fetus? So is it a treifa or not? It came from a treifa. So the Gemara says like this, says Rav Ami, l'divrei ha'oiser mater, l'divrei ha'mater oiser. So it says Rav Ami, it's mamish tali in that shaila. According to Rav Meir, that it requires its own shechita, that means that the baby is mamish independent from the mother, and although the mother is a treifa, the baby is going to be mutter. But l'divrei ha'mater oiser. But the Rabbanon who feel that it does not need its own shechita, who are normally lenient, that does not require its own shechita for the fetus, they would tell you the fetus is aser. Why does it not need its own shechita? Because it's a chelik of the mother. If it's a chelik of the mother's a treifa, that means the baby is a treifa as well. So it's mamish telling in the shayla, Rav Meir who's strict would be lenient, the Rabbanan who's lenient would be strict. So it's mamish tali in these two shaylas. The Rabbanan who are lenient and say that it does not need its own shechita would tell you because it's a chelik of the mother. Because it's a chelik of the mother, in this case that'll be a stringency that it's a treifa. But the Rav Meir who says it requires its own shechita, which is normally a chomer will be a kula, it requires its own shechita because it's a separate entity from the mother. If it's a separate entity from the mother, that means that the shechita, that it could come from a treifa and it could be mutter because it's mamish two separate entities. Rava disagrees and he says no, even the Rabbanon, I say it's mutter. What was the cheshbon of Rav Ami? Rav Ami says according to the Rabbanon, it does not require its own shechita. Why? Because the shechita of the mother helps. Why? Because it's the chelik of the mother. If it's a chelik of the mother, if the mother is a treifa, the baby is a treifa as well. Says Rava, no, you misunderstand. The Rabbanan are lenient not because they believe the baby is a chelik of the mother. They believe that you have two choices when the baby is born. You could either shech the mother or you could shech it. Meaning, the Rabbanan are a super leniency. It's not just that the shechita of the mother helps the baby because the baby is a chelik of the mother. The baby, you have a choice. You could look at it as a chelik of the mother and the shechita of the mother helps, or you could shech it on its own. So the Rabbanan sort of look at it as they get the best of both worlds. It could be a chelik of the mother, you could choose not to be a chelik of the mother. And in which case, it's always going to be lenient. You could look at it as a chelik of the mother, it does not require its own shechita, or you could look at it as a separate entity, in which case, it requires its own shechita, but then, if the mother's a treif, it'll be mutter as well. Arba simana machshir rachmana. This ben pekua has 4 simanim. You could check the mother's 2 simanim, you could check its 2 simanim, and either way, it's going to create a super leniency. Amr of Chizda, a similar halacha, this concept that the Rabbanan could look at it as a chelik of the mother, or not a chelik of the mother. You could rely on the mother's shechita, you can have his own shechita. This is going to be, we're going to use this to explain the shita of Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda said, Hashaychet is a treifa, if you shech the treifa, and you find inside a full-fledged live fetus, go to the next page, ton shechita, the fetus requires its own shechita. Now, why does a fetus require its own shechita? Pashas. It follows Rameir shita, which is all 9-month-old fetuses require its own shechita. But then it said, and you have to give the Zoroi L'chayim Keva, which is the foreleg, the jaws, and the stomach, to the kayin because the baby requires its own matnas kuhuna, because the baby's mamish separate like Rameir. But then it said in mace, but if it died without having shechita, tar milatame, the tumah is removed. Why? Because why isn't it an avela? Because the mother shechita removes its tumah. So it's a bit of a contradiction. You first finished telling me that it requires its own shechita. Why? Because you're following Rameir that it requires its own shechita. It's a separate behema. But then you said if it died without shechita, it doesn't have tumas nevela. Why? Because the shechita's mother covers it. I don't understand. Do you follow Rameir or not? If you follow Rameir, it requires its own shechita, and if it doesn't get shechita, it's an avela. If you don't follow Rameir, you follow Rabbana. Why does it require its own shechita? So seemingly it's a contradiction. So the Gemara is going to first say that there's a brisa that has a similar problem, but the brisa is not as stark. This is a problem. So the Gemara is going to answer like we said before, and that is it follows when it says that it requires its own shechita. It doesn't mean that it follows Rameir. It really follows the Rabbanon, and it follows the Rabbanon, and therefore it's the best of both worlds. You want to give its own shechita, great. If it didn't give its own shechita, you can rely on the mother's shechita. So it's a kula both ways. You could give its own shechita, and therefore, if it's the mother's a treifa, it doesn't automatically become aser. You could shech the baby and it'd be mutter, because it's not automatically a stringency because the mother's a treifa. But if you didn't shecht it, the shechita of the mother removes the tumah, because the Rabbanon are leading to both ways. The Gemara just speaks out the problem. Amrle Rabbi said to Rav Chizda, ton shechita. You said that if the baby is found inside the mother who's a treifa, it requires on shechita. Kiman karameir. That's because you're following Rameir, that the baby is a separate entity from the mother. But it may star milatame masa kaman karabana. But then you said if it didn't get shechita, it doesn't have tumah. Why? Because the mother shechita removes the tumah. I thought it's a separate entity. So it's a contradiction. So the Gemara Rav Chizda responded, "Why are you asking a kasha on me? Is a very similar brayse of Ultamei Chadatani Rav Chia. Rav Chia had a brayse that said." Same words, ton shchita, v'meis tar milatame masa. It's the same. Mamish come out the same words. Ton shchita keman karav meir, v'meis tar milatame masa karabanon. So why are you asking Hashami? It's a brisa. So the Gemara says no. The brisa is not as bad because the brisa you could argue means like this. Really, the brisa could follow Rameir that if the baby requires zon shchita, and then when it says that it died, it doesn't mean that it died after the womb. It means if you found it dead inside, then even Rameir agrees that it does not require its own shechita, so it's not as a problem. But according to you, you said the baby requires its own shechita, and if the mother's a tray for the baby's mutter, if it has its own shechita, and then you said if after it comes out it died, it doesn't have tumah. That's a contradiction. Halei kasha. Rav Chiyam kvar motza meis kamer l'dach kasha. So Amrei Rav Chizda said, like we said before, l'didach nami l'kasha arba simanim achshav rachmana, and that is that he really follows the Rabbanon. But the Rabbanon are super lenient. They're lenient if that the mother's a treifa, you could rely on the baby, look at his own entity, and it could have its own shechita mimuter. And if the baby does, and if you want, you can rely on the mother's shechita to remove the tumah. So it's a leniency in both ways. Kisalak Rav Zera, when Rav Zera went up from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkechei Rav Asi, the Yosef Karmel Shmaita. He found Rav Asi was teaching, and Amarlei Yasher, he said the teaching of Rav Chizda, that the baby can have its own shechita if the mother's a tray for the baby's mutter, but if the baby then dies afterwards without shechita, you could rely on the mother's shechita to remove the tumah. So he says, Amar Yasha, he says, well said, Rav Yechon said the same thing. Now, the question is, what does Rish Lakish say about this? He said that Rav Yechon agreed. Now, normally, Rish Lakish is always there. Either Rish Lakish agrees, and you should quote him, or Rish Lakish argues, and you should mention that. Why is he not mentioning? Mechader, Palaga, Rish Lakish, what's Rish Lakish? He said, Rav Yechon agrees with me. What about Rish Lakish? So Misha Havashayile V'Shasik. He says, I don't know what Rish Lakish held. Why? Because some say that what Rish Lakish would do is he wouldn't answer right away. He wouldn't argue right away. He would listen. And then after like an hour, he would get up. And I left before Rish Lakish said his opinion. So I don't know whether he agrees or not. Or Rish Lakish was drinking. He was drinking a cup of water. So I couldn't tell whether he argued, and then I left. In other words, I left before I could hear Rish Lakish's opinion. So I don't know whether he agrees or disagrees. I can just tell you that Rav Yechanan agrees with me. Okay, now we said in the Mishnah that according to the Rabbanon, the 9-month-old baby does not require its own shechita. And then Rosh Shimon Shazuri said, if you have a 9-month-old fetus that's walking around for 5 years, you could shoot in the head. Isn't Rishim Shazuri saying the same thing as the Rabbanon? The Rabbanon say it doesn't require its own shechita. Rishim Shazuri is saying if it walks around later on, you can shoot in the head. It doesn't require its own shechita. The same thing. Says the Gemara, Hanu Tanakama, Rav Kana, Hifris al Gabe Karkei B'nai. The difference is like this. Min HaTorah, Rishim Shazuri and the Rabbanon agree that no shechita is required. The difference is, the Rabbanon would say, once the baby comes out of the womb and starts walking around, you can't just shoot in the head. It's a bad optic, Maris Ayin. It requires its own shechita for rabbinic purposes. Rishim Shazuri holds there's no takanas chacham to require shechita. So everyone agrees, a 9-month-old baby, if you find inside, you could shoot it in the head when it's in the womb, no problem. Rabbanan and Rishim Shazuri hold that does not require its own shechita. The mother's shechita covers it. The machlokes is whether there's a takanas chazal to require shechita once it's walking around. Rishim Shazuri says no, you could shoot in the head. It could be 5 years old, shoot in the head. The Rabbanan say no. Once it's walking, the Rabbanan say once it's walking around, it requires its own shechita for marisayin purposes. Okay. Amr Misharshia. Misharshia says a halacha. The divra oimer choishin lezera av. If you assume that a baby, part of the baby is from the father, then ben pekua haba behema malaisa havlarin takana. We had this before that if a ben pekua dad, so that means that the dad was a fetus, the ben pekua, and it mates with a regular behema, so the bull is a ben pekua and the cow is a regular healthy cow, and they have a baby. That baby's a problem. Why? Because the father is a ben pekua, which means it doesn't need its own shechita. The mother requires a shechita, so that means that baby has 2 simanim. One siman requires shechita, one siman is kilu, who was already nishchat. So it's like if it was born with 1 siman, and therefore it's like a treifa. You can't shech the baby, can't eat the baby. The baby is a problem. Amr Abaya. Now we said before that according to Rishim Shazuri, you could just shoot a ben pekua when it's 5 years old. But according to the Rabbanon, once it's walking around for marisayin purposes, it doesn't look good to just shoot it. People are going to think you don't need shechita. So for optics, you can't. You have to shech it. Amr Abaya kol moedim b'kol ben kluta. Abaya says that if this ben pekua is not just a ben pekua, but it also was born with 1 hoof, no split hoofs, it's still kosher, but it was born. It's a cow, so it's not only a ben pekua, but it's also born with a deformity. So that everyone agrees shemuta. You don't have to shecht. You could shoot in the head. Why? I thought the Rabbanan are against shooting in the head because of optics, because marasayin. So he says, yeah, because kol milsa ditmiya mitkadarkele inshi. To not only be a ben pekua and to be a ben pekua born with not split hooves is such a uniqueness. Everyone knows about it, and therefore you could shoot in the head. It's not a bad optic. People are not going to compare it to other things. People are going to know it's a ben pekua. Now, normally a regular cow, not everyone's going to know it's a ben pekua, but it's a ben pekua with a deformity. That's already optics not concerned. People know about that's the case. People are not going to say, "Oh, I guess you don't have to shech." Everyone knows that that's a ben pekua. Says the Gemara, and some have a different version that it's not enough for the baby to be a ben pekua and split hooves. It has to be the baby is a ben pekua with no split hooves, and its mommy has a not split hooves. So you have an animal without split hooves, which is a deformity, and it has a baby that has a deformity and a ben pekua. So it's a ben pekua with 2 generations of deformities. That's when there's no concern of optics, because everyone knows. Akol ma'adim b'kol include ben pekua. Shemuter my time a trait to me a midka dokir inish. Now again, Rishim Shazuri shita is that a ben pekua you could shoot in the head. It doesn't require shechita, and there's no optics concerned. Amr Ziri, Amr Chanina, halach Rishim Shazuri. We paskin like Rishim Shazuri. V'chein ha Rishim Shazuri mater b'benoi uben benoi etzef kol ders. Not only Rishim Shazuri hold that a ben pekua does not require shechita at all, no, not min ha-Torah, not min ha-Rabbanon. More than this, Rishim Shazuri shita is that a ben pekua's child doesn't need shechita, a ben pekua's grandson doesn't need shechita. Ad seif kol ders. Meaning, again, it has to be where the Mefarshim speak out. It has to be that both parents are ben pekuas. But if both parents are ben pekuas, then the children do not need shechita as well. So not just the animals, but their offspring as well. Rav Yechon disagrees. He says, no, who meant mutter? Only the ben pekua itself is not need shechita. But the offspring of ben pekuas need shechita. Ada bar Chavu havle pekua denafel dubaleh. Ada bar Chavu had a ben pekua that was attacked and injured by a wolf. Now here's the thing. That's a treifa, right? It was injured by a wolf. It had a simani treifa. The problem is a ben pekua doesn't have simani treifa. Why? Because it doesn't need shechita. So you could just eat it. You could shoot in the head, right? The same you could shoot in the head, you could eat it with a treifa. Also come to Rav Ashi. Amarle zil shachter. Rav Ashi says you could eat it, even though it has simani treifa. Simani treifa are irrelevant by ben pekua, but you should still shecht it first. That's very strange. Why are you shechting it? Rishim Shazuri holds his own shechita required. The Rabbanan are the ones who say that you should shecht it because of optics. So he's saying you should shecht it to machmer like the Rabbanan. You could still eat it because simani treifa don't apply to ben pekua because it doesn't min ha-Torah need shechita, so therefore it's not min ha-Torah asa b'treifa. But you should still shecht it, not like Rishim Shazuri. So I'm lay. So you tell me I should shecht it to be choishish for the sheet of the Rabbanon that there's a bad optics. I thought we passed on Shim Shazuri. If we pass on Shim Shazuri, shechit is not required. V'chein, Shim Shazuri matir b'noy b'b'noy etzev kol adoris. V'afir yichel lekamrel b'noy v'yuloi. If you pass on Shim Shazuri, which we do, why am I shechting the Ben Peku itself? Amrlei, Rav Yechanan did Rav Shim Shazuri kamer. He says when Rav Yechanan said Rav Shim Shazuri shita, it doesn't mean he follows that way. He was explaining Rav Shim Shazuri shita, meaning we don't pass like Rav Shim Shazuri. You're right, according to Rav Shim Shazuri, there's no need for a shechita of the Ben Peku, even while it's walking around. But we machmel like the Rabbanon. I thought we passed like Rav Shim Shazuri. V'loy oid. Kol makim sheshana Rav Shim Shazuri mishasein halach k'maisei. Anytime Rav Shim Shazuri shita is mentioned in Shas, we pass like him. So if we pass like him, why are you shechting the Ben Peku? Amalei anaki hasriole. He says, although you have the tradition that we follow Shim Shazuri throughout Shas, I disagree. I follow Rav Yenasan the Amar halacha kim Shim Shazuri, that we only pass on Shim Shazuri in two cases of Shas. Not in this case, in two cases. In the Masukan, in a case of a get with a person who's dying, as we'll see in a moment, and betrumas ma'aser shel demai. And the case of Trumas Ma'aser of Demai, but we don't generally pass on Shim Shazuri, and therefore in this case of a Ben Peku, we don't pass on Shim Shazuri either, and therefore we pass on that you have to shecht a Ben Peku because of Marasain. What are the two cases that we pass on like Rav Shim Shazuri? Masukan. The case as follows. Normally, we had this many times, to say very quickly, normally if a person appoints a shliach to write a get, you can't just deliver the get, because he said write the get, he never said deliver the get. Why is he writing and not delivering it? Because he wants to cause shalom bayis problems with his wife, he wants to threaten her. Fine. But there are certain situations where we accept that when he says write, he means give. Says the Gemara, the Tanan, if a person is going out to be executed, and he says write a get for my wife, you could deliver it also. He's going to be executed. So when he says write a get for my wife, what he means is write and deliver it. He's not just interested in writing and keeping in his storage closet. He obviously means to write and deliver it. That was when you're going to be executed. Then Chazal extended it if you're going on a long sea journey. You're going to the sea for a while, and you say write to get to my wife to a shliach, he could deliver it. Rav Shimon Shazuri Omer Afa Masukan. Shimon Shazuri added, if a person is dying or he has a deathly ill case of illness, and he says write to get from my wife, you could deliver it as well. That's the one case where we pass on Shimon Shazuri. The other case is Trumas Ma'aser Shel Demai. Demai means so you're not sure whether Trumas and Ma'aser were separated. So it's Machmer, it's a Darabana and Chazal, Takanas Chazal to separate Ma'aser and Truma from Amaratzim, because we're not sure whether it was separated. It's not that we know it wasn't separated, it's a chash. So you have Trumas Ma'aser, Truma Ma'aser Shel Demai, so you have Trumas Ma'aser. So that you separated Ma'aser, and then you separated a tenth of the Ma'aser to give to a Kohen, and then you put it aside, and then it fell back in. Now here's the problem. Normally, when Trumas and Ma'aser falls into a mixture, that's a major issue. I can't eat that, I'm a Yisrael. But this whole thing is Demai. So the whole thing is a Chumrah, and it fell in, so what do? So Shimon Shazuri Yomer, Af B'chol, even during the weekday, it's not just a kula for Shabbos, you have no choices. Even during the weekday, you don't have to give to a kohen. Here's what you do. You shayel. You ask the seller, did he separate? I buy from an Amaretz. Normally I don't trust him, and I have to separate Trumas and Ma'aser on my own. I separate Trumas and Ma'aser, and then it fell into my mixture, messing up my entire mixture. Here's what I do. Ask the Amaretz, did you separate Trumas and Ma'aser? And if he says yes, then you could say, listen, then the entire Trumas and Ma'aser I separated wasn't necessary, and therefore it wasn't Kaddish, and you could eat the mixture. Those are the two cases where we pass on Shimon Shazuri, every other case not, including our discussion. I will stop here.